This happened to me almost 8 years ago and I've never stopped thinking about it. I was in my early 20s at the time and was camping out in the wilderness of Upper Idaho. I wouldn't say I was an experienced camper yet, but I did go out pretty frequently on long hikes and knew the basics of camping. Also in that territory there was a lot of wildlife including black bears and grizzly bears, so being prepared was a must, which deterred a lot of casual hikers and campers. Not many people live up there either and you'd only see the occasional forest hiker on a trail. Most of the campsites in Upper Idaho are not very crowded. That being said, although admittedly unnecessary, I tried to stay away from those tourist-type spots and stick to lesser-known trails. For this trip I'd chosen one that was just outside of the big mountain range. This trail was well known. It just went through the forest and along the hills bordering the mountain, leading to a nice open spot with views of the mountain range. The nearest trail I knew of was 3 miles away that led to a small lake which I assumed might have a couple other people, so that's why I skipped it. I was right though, my whole hike there nobody else was around. The trail seemed basically unused and when I got to the campground it was open and empty. I set up my tent on the far side and found some big stones to build a fire pit with. I think I had 2 or 3 hours of daylight left, so I wasn't planning on doing much for the rest of the day, to sit around the campsite and think about my plans for tomorrow when the sun sets. I built up the fire and roasted some marshmallows while stargazing. The whole valley was really quiet, just a subtle breeze coming through and the occasional wildlife calling out. But then something interrupted the silence. A repeated crunch of leaves coming from out in the woods. After a second it was pretty obvious that it was a person walking. I didn't know what to do except sit there and stare in that direction, kind of just shocked and confused why someone was out there until they showed up at the edge of my campsite. It was a man, but with the shadows from the campfire flickering over him, I couldn't make out much to identify him with. I could see they had a typical camping backpack on and that was about it. They stood there and looked at me, then at the rest of my campsite and before I could say anything they said sorry, then turned around and walked back the exact way I heard them come from. Also the way they said sorry was like they were trying to be quiet. It was just barely louder than a whisper. It was really strange. What were they even sorry for? They had to be looking for a campsite. There's no way they were just walking around that night like that for no reason. It felt really unsettling. I didn't feel in danger, but the way they acted was just out of the usual behavior of any hiker I'd ever come across. Their footsteps walked away, turning into the subtle quiet night it was just moments ago, as if nothing had happened. Despite the unusual interruption, I ended up going back to stargazing and relaxing only a few minutes afterward. I hoped wherever that guy was heading, he'd make it there soon and safely, but aside from that, I didn't think too much more about it. Several hours went by, or at least it felt like that. Clouds started to roll in, blocking out the moon and stars and casting a shadow over the entire forest. I wasn't exactly tired or ready to sleep yet, so I sat along the campfire and hoped I'd eventually get bored and sleepy enough to call it a night. But then I heard footsteps again. They were more rushed this time, almost like panicked footsteps running through the woods in the exact same place the man came from earlier in the night. I stood up, getting worried as they approached. Then he came into the light. I could tell by the backpack and his general figure that it was the same hiker from before. He walked further up, this time enough for me to see him better. He had a medium scruffy beard, oily black hair, along with some signs of distress on his clothes, as well as dirt scuffed over his face. And his eyes were wide, like he was scared, yet his mouth was straight and emotionless. "Is everything okay? You probably should have made it to your campsite by now. It's pretty late." The man stood there, catching his breath but keeping on guard. His eyes looked over my right shoulder for a second, then back at me. "Are you lost?" "Maybe I can help," I said. He then muttered no under his breath, saying he was just hiking out in the woods and didn't mean to bother me. He spoke slowly though, and the whole time his eyes were constantly shifting to something on the right side of me. He'd only look for a split second, then his eyes would lock back onto me. Listen, you look pretty nervous. I can help. Maybe send a radio message for you or whatever you need." He seemed to ignore what I said, but he then suddenly locked his eyes on me more intently than before. "You're camping here right now. Why?" The way he asked, it was really unsettling. His eyes darted to my right again, and I couldn't resist the urge to look over my shoulder. "Empty. Dark woods. I saw nothing. I was getting really creeped out now and wasn't sure how much more I wanted to talk to this guy, let alone try to help him with whatever was going on. Then he asked something even more creepy. Is it just you here? Are you alone? Where are the others? Taken aback by the question, I hesitated to respond right away, and before I could even answer, he spoke again. Have you been following me? Something was off. His manner was changing and he was tensing up. I said no and that I didn't know what he was talking about, but then his eyes shifted onto something over my shoulder again. However, this time they didn't shift back to me. His wide, hollow eyes were locked on something as he asked one last question. Then why are you with her? I instantly turned around and looked over my right shoulder, but my eyes fell on nothing, still just empty dark woods. I looked back at the man. His face fell into terror, still staring beyond me, before he suddenly broke out into a sprint, running deeper into the woods. Within seconds he was past all the lights and completely gone. The direction he ran was nowhere near the trail or really anything at all. My heart was still racing. I was looking all around, especially behind me, trying to figure out what the hell that guy was talking about and what he was seeing in those brief moments after he asked. Then why are you with her? I thought I'd connected everything, that this man was being followed by some woman or group in the woods. And when I looked over my shoulder, I fully expected to see her standing behind me, deranged and terrifying. But now I didn't know what to believe. I was scared shirtless though, and was absolutely not staying any longer. I gathered up everything and started moving. Even though I saw the guy running the other direction from the trail, I was still on edge the entire walk. Every slight noise had me startled and expecting to see some woman following me or whoever the hell he was talking about. But I never did. I made it to my car and left. The following morning I decided to put in a note with the police station near me about the guy out there because with more time to think about it, I was pretty worried about him. While I don't have an exact explanation for what went on that night, I can provide a decent theory for the situation after consulting dozens of people over the years. The most likely and tragic explanation is the man may have gotten lost and been out there for a very long time, probably becoming extremely hungry and dehydrated to the point of near insanity and paranoia, thinking something or someone was following him through the woods at night. Unfortunately, with him not being in the right state of mind, he didn't know help when he saw it. When he found me, he was probably too paranoid to know that I could have saved him, giving him food and water and letting him out of the woods. He might have been so out of it that he didn't even know he was lost anymore. He was too caught up in the paranoia of whoever he thought was following him. While this is the most probable cause of the man's behavior and what happened that night, there's still no saying if it's actually true. There's a chance he really was being followed and wasn't sure whether or not I was just another stalker, part of the group, and didn't trust me. If that was the case, then him freaking me out that night likely saved my life from whoever else was out there. However, we probably will never know for sure. The man was never found or spotted since, so unfortunately it seems he never made it out of the woods. Kidding. I was at home this night planning to pull an all-nighter to catch up on some work papers that I needed to have done. I procrastinated just a bit too long with these, and due to a couple other things coming up, I really had no choice but to stay up and finish it that night. I brewed a cup of coffee, went upstairs to my office, closed myself in to keep out any distractions, and just powered through the night. I did surprisingly well for a few hours, sipping on my coffee and locking in, but I could feel myself start to fade as my coffee ran out and so did my energy. I thought maybe stretching my legs for a minute and going downstairs to make another cup would help me reset. I got up and walked down to the kitchen. But as the coffee brewed, I felt noticeably colder than I was in the rest of the house, like there was a cold breeze blowing through the downstairs floor. I went and checked the thermostat and the heat was on, but it was several degrees lower than it should have been. So I did a little investigating and happened to notice a window on the back of the living room was open. Now, I did open my downstairs windows fairly often during the day, but as far as I knew, I'd never forgotten to close them before. Also, this one was wide open, not just cracked like I usually left them. Understandably, I was a bit shaken as I approached it. As I looked at it for a moment, the thought of someone having opened it and gotten inside crept into my mind. However, I saw nothing else to justify that. I stuck my head outside and looked at the ground beneath the window and saw no footprints or disturbances in the dirt, and there was nothing on the window like I'd expect from someone crawling in. In moments like these, your mind wants to assume you're overthinking it and that something like this would never really happen to you. I started to assume that I had just opened the window more than usual during the day and forgotten to close it. With no other signs to suggest otherwise, I closed the window, grabbed my fresh cup of coffee, and went back upstairs. Over the next 30 minutes, I found my mind still wandering, not fully satisfied with the conclusion I'd come to. So I got up and quickly looked around the house, just to be absolutely certain I was alone. I found nothing and went back to work. Another hour went by. I was mentally exhausted, but a sudden thump behind me instantly woke me up. It was loud, as if it were just behind my desk, but nothing was back there. I knew my bedroom was on the other side of that wall and figured it had to be something from in there, but the sound was far too loud to ignore. And with the window thing from earlier, it was hard to keep myself from thinking the worst. Still, I got up, walked into the hallway, and opened the bedroom door. I scanned the room from the hallway before slowly stepping inside. Everything looked normal. You'd think such a loud sound would be easy to identify, like something heavy falling, but it wasn't. The floor was clear, and as I searched the rest of the bedroom, there wasn't a single thing out of place. I was honestly starting to believe that pulling this all-nighter was making me lose my mind. I went back to the office, but for the next 15 minutes it was insanely hard to focus. I knew I had heard that thump. It was so loud. How could it be nothing? Eventually, my focus broke and I spun around in my chair, looking at the wall behind me. As I stared at it, thinking, I suddenly felt stupid. There was a closet right there. It was a small closet I used only for storing old clothes and winter jackets. I had forgotten it even existed. Curious, but not expecting anything, I got up and walked over to it, casually sliding the door open. My breath left my lungs. A surge of fear crippled my body. I was face to face with a stranger. He was only inches from me, hidden in the back of the closet behind the jackets. If not for the thin layer of clothes between us, he probably could have reached out and grabbed me before I even had a chance to run. I heard the entire closet tear apart as the man forced his way out to chase me. As I ran into the hallway, the man called out my name instantly, sending a shiver through me. His voice wasn't one I knew. It was gritty and disturbing, the way he said my name, as if he knew me. I made it out of the house as the man seemed to put more effort into trying to convince me to stop running rather than actually chasing me. I ran to a neighbor's house around the corner, pounding on their door until they answered and called the police. The man was no longer in the house when they searched it. There weren't even any signs of where he ran off to, and that's pretty much where it ended. Some unknown man had climbed through one of my downstairs windows in the middle of the night, quietly moved through my house, and hidden in my office closet, likely while I was downstairs checking the house. That means for over an hour, the man was right behind me, watching me as I worked. Even worse, he knew my name, meaning it was almost certainly a planned break-in by a potential stalker. It's hard living with the thought that he might come back. Had I not pulled an all-nighter and gone to sleep instead, I very well might not be here right now. This was only a month ago. It was the weekend, and while I usually stayed home, this Saturday was different. One of my best friends was celebrating her birthday, so I went. It wasn't supposed to be a big party, just close friends, a couple of drinks, and conversation. I lived about a 10-minute drive away, and around 6:30 I drove over. The night was calm. We drank a bit, talked, and around 1 a.m. most people either left or stayed over. I didn't like sleeping anywhere but my own bed, but I was a little tipsy and didn't want to drive. Against my better judgment, I decided to walk home. It was about 25 to 30 minutes through quiet suburbs, a walk I'd done many times. The neighborhood was silent. No cars, no people, no lights on in the houses. Everyone was asleep. At one point, a pair of headlights came down the road. The car slowed and stopped near me. The window cracked open, and a man asked if I was okay or needed a ride. I said I was fine, and he drove off. A few minutes later, I noticed headlights behind me again. It was the same car, coming from the opposite direction, pulling over and parking instead of passing me. That felt strange. I kept walking, checking behind me, but eventually the car was out of sight. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. About 10 minutes from home, I saw a car parked ahead, headlights on, sitting in the middle of the road. It was the same car. My stomach dropped. There were only two routes home, the road I was on, or a dark park trail through the woods. Normally I avoided the trail at night, but now the road felt more dangerous. As I approached, I realized the car was parked right near the trail entrance, almost too perfectly placed. The closer I got, the more uneasy I felt. I trusted my gut and stayed on the road. As I passed the car, nothing happened. I looked inside, it was empty. Then I looked toward the woods. A man stood there, partially hidden behind the trees, watching me. I ran. Moments later, I heard him get into the car. I pulled out my phone while running, and that must have scared him off because he made a U-turn and drove away. I didn't stop running until I got home. I reported it to the police as an attempted kidnapping. It was too coincidental to be anything else. If I had taken the obvious route through the woods, I would have walked straight into his trap. Out there alone, I wouldn't have stood a chance. It's only been a month, and with just a car description and a voice, it's unlikely they'll ever find or convict anyone.